Well, if 2023 were to be given a name, just as China gives names to years, like 2023, the year of a water rabbit, for Nigeria will be the year of elections, naturally, because this year packed so much elections. We had the general elections, the off-cycle elections, which you just saw there in Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo. So this year was fully packed with politics. But there's been a lot of, yes, political activities, but let's pick up the pieces and really look deeply into how this year panned out politically and how we can rate the year, hoping to learn from it. And of course, move into the new year, 2024. And to do that with us this morning, we're joined by Chris Kwaja, who is an Associate Professor, International Relations and Strategic Studies, Modibo Adama University, Yola, also Country Director of the United States Institute of Peace, USIP, joins us virtually this morning from Jos. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily. And right here in our studio is Anthony Killer, Professor of Strategy and Development and Director, Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies, is right here with us in our Lagos studio. It's good to have you as well, Prof.
Good to be here.
Good to see you after a while, I must say.
Good to be here.
You know, the year of politics, I don't know what you'll call 2023, but we had a lot of politics. But I'd like to start by getting your thoughts. Was 2023 the year we regressed politically or progressed politically for you, that is?
Oh dear, that's amazing you put it that way. I didn't see that coming. So let's start from the known, the familiar, and the indisputable. Definitely a year of politics, definitely a year of election, definitely a year of alignment. And of course, when you have political battles, some people lose, some people win. It'll be interesting to see who lost, who won, and why. Have we progressed? I think not. I think overall we've not progressed politically. But I did not see a major regression, by the way. You know, we're just sort of there, tinkling left and right. Nothing major has really happened. You know, the trajectory is about the same. So if you're looking like a graph, I don't want to bore people on early in the morning, but if you're looking at a graph, you won't see a major shift. You know, you just see some tiny movements here and there. So, which is a shame, because as a political economist, I ask for quantum leaps generally in things. So we haven't seen that. We're just what we are. And I'm sure you want to look at that later. Some individuals, some organizations have gained, many have lost. And so I think that it is a political year.
So overall, you think we didn't make progress?
No, I do not think we made major progress because in 2023, progress is majorly determined by transparency, swiftness, and electronic measures. You know, that is the world we are now. You know, if it was about 100 years ago, it would have been about language. Are you moving from Latin to English and to other popular language? It would have been about prose. It would have been about the kind of document. But we live in an era where most things are measured digitally. And we need to be conscious of that in everything we do. And, and to that extent, we haven't made a major error. One thing that a regressive step we've made is the omnipresence of the judiciary in political matters. That is a very bad and sad thing. It shouldn't be that way. But you see, unfortunately, this is, and I'm looking at negative things. Unfortunately, we have become more partisan than before, which I think is not good for progress either.
More partisan than before?
Than before, yes.
Is that a bad thing? Doesn't that mean people are more politically aware?
It's a paradox. No, it's actually not good. You see, people say that. For example, a big advocate of that, who himself is not very political, partisan at the moment, is Nasir El-Rufai. He's the one who advocates that everybody should join politics. But I see the paradox and it makes me laugh. It's not true that everybody should join politics. He has joined it and look at where he's left at now. You see, the thing is this, by this idea of everybody being politically involved, is good to the extent that people can scrutinize and are aware of what is going on. But I repeat, and I've always said it as much as possible, it is bad to the extent that it makes politics, especially partisan politics, central in our life. by its nature, partisan politics cannot be objective. And where, if you have a society where non-objective factors are the driving fact, it kills the intellect, it kills the ability to be rational, ability to be honest, ability to be clear-cut.
Intellect. It's
kills the intellect.
Apolitical,
yes,
not advised against strongly, particularly in these parts, as making you being left behind
exactly.
in the gains that would come from being more aware and involved.
Of it. Yes.
Isn't that the case?
Exactly. And then you see what happens as well is that it makes people relative in everything they do. You know, and I've done this experiment a lot of time. I take somebody who's supporting one party, I show them something and I say, oh, look at what this party said. They go all against it. And I'll show them that actually it's your party that said so. Then they go, oh, well, you know, it all depends. And it has become a form of life in the country. So we have a new generation of sophists. Go and look at them on the Twitter. You know, once it's something their side is doing, it's okay, it's bread and butter. One is the other side is disgusting.
I see the point you're making. Very interesting. Let me go to Associate Professor Chris Kwaja, and I wonder what you think about the year 2023, politically speaking. I know a lot of people, and I see it, particularly politicians, will say, well, our democracy is nascent, okay? You can't compare us with the United States. You know, they're grandfathers in that. We've just had, 30 years or thereabout, or even less than that, 24 years in this Fourth Republic. So, you know what? We're still making some of the mistakes we ought to make. For you, did we regress or progress, politically speaking?
Thank you very much. I think when you get caught up in this crisis of binaries in the context of making a choice between blue and white or black and white, good, bad, then you have this very complicated position where myself and my colleagues sit in terms of where are we in terms of our political trajectory. And I think for me, the responses have been mixed depending on where you stand. But for us as intellectuals, we should be able to provide clear-cut responses. And clear-cut responses in the context of our political trajectory is that we are yet to make the kind of meaningful movement that is required of a country that has experienced over 2 decades of uninterrupted elections. We've seen elections that produce controversial outcomes, either in terms of the inability of INEC to discharge its role as expected, elections where the politicization of the process was one that brought in the military and the police as the ones that are determining how these elections should move. We've seen the judiciary being on trial itself. We expected the judiciary to be a temple of justice, but the reactions out there is that we've not seen the judiciary discharge that.
It appears we have connection challenges through to Mr. Kwajak, I believe. I hope I got his name correctly.
In a way, situation where the judiciary now, where you have a situation whereby the judiciary is now determining who wins an elections rather than the people, then you have a real political issue to deal with. That is from the political side. When we come to the whole question of diversity management in the context of how Nigeria as a country that has to hold together people of different nationalities and religions, we see also some of the crises around how we're able to accommodate ourselves as one indivisible entity. Today, when you look at 2023, from a two-fighting situation of communal conflict to more about organized crime in the context of what bandits, insurgent groups, siege, that on its own is one major challenge that we are having today, and the key question is, does the Nigerian state have the power, the capacity, and the ability to really address organized crime in the context of what we see today as bandits and armed groups holding communities siege? And I think for me, that's one of the conversations that I think we need to hold as a people to ensure that the state reassert itself as the sole guarantor and controller of the instruments of coercion.
I was hoping you won't, run ahead of the subject matter and expand it beyond politics. I'd like us to stay with politics, Mr. Kwaja. Speaking of progression or regression, let's weigh that now against the backdrop of political participation in 2023. It was the year that we saw the emergence of what would be described now as a third force movement, maybe add to that even a fourth force movement when you consider what happened in Kano State during the presidential election. Did we progress, if you see that, expansion of the political space, when we consider the obedient movement and the NNPP? So did we make progress in terms of political participation in 2023? And following the test of that system at the Assembly, where we now have a bipartisan legislature, would you consider the test of, politics, in terms of the colors at the National Assembly, progress as well?
This is not the first time that a third force or a fourth force will emerge. As we look at what is happening within the context of the presidential elections, we also need to look at what is happening at the sub-national level. For now, yes, we have the National Assembly, but we are yet to see how the power play within the National Assembly will present itself in 2024. In 2023, they've used the last 6 months to settle down, and in settling down, we've seen committee appointments made. We've seen the body language of some members of the National Assembly. In 2024, there will be clarity around whether or not the ruling party will be able to work with all the other political parties, or there will be an emasculation of other political parties in the context of. I have not seen the kind of third force that we envision in this country, a third force that will emerge and rise above the sentiments of regions, of ethnicity, of religion, a third force that, regardless of who is being presented as the face of that third force, it should be a Nigerian face. It should be a face with the capacity to mobilize Nigerians. A face that every Nigerian will see he or herself has been represented in the manifesto of that third phase, in terms of the kind of leadership structure that will emerge in the context of how citizens vote. But one of the major challenges we have had with Nigeria is that third forces always emerge. Now, when they disappear, they don't strengthen and fortify their hold on society. We need a third force that will be able to engage Nigeria in a way that strengthen and deepen their political and civic consciousness beyond elections. A third force that is committed to engaging the governance process. A third force that is committed to making a mark in the whole.
Mr. Kwaja, let's address that audio challenge, and then we'll come back to you. It's really seriously impeding our conversation. I'm going to bring it to you, Mr. Killer. The same question. Essentially, I'm trying to understand what Mr. Kwaja is saying. I'm wondering whether he's saying that we missed out on the opportunity to scoop the gains from the emergence of a third and a fourth force. Perhaps you could take all of that in your response, Professor.
Well, I think from his own view, I think what Kwaja says is that the third force is not the real third force he designed. He designed something pan-Nigeria, generally accepted and universally acclaimed as the alternative. But I think that is utopistic because, he has just this kind of Jesus Christ that everybody will accept, regardless of the position. The truth of the matter is that, unfortunately, I don't know even if it's unfortunate anymore, because I'm getting tired of using that adjective, is that Nigerian politics is very mad, is very marked by ethnicity. So at the moment, a lot of people don't care where I'm from. They just know me as Anthony Killer. They buy my books, they read my essays, they argue with me, they like me or loathe me. The day I become a partisan politician, they will dig where I'm from. Then it will then matter where I'm from in Nigeria. And that's what politics does to you. As long as I'm the professor of strategy and development, it really doesn't matter to people. You see, that is part of the downside of politics. Then to look at it and then to realize that, maybe some of my friends are from this part of the country, maybe some of them are part of the country. It is not an accident of nature. It is the laziness and the greediness of our political class, that rather than focusing on ideas and policy, because let's face it, and this, people should take this as no disrespect, but generally speaking, our politicians are not very original thinkers. They're not very innovative. If you look at them generally, and this is across spectrum, you can see that in most cases they have width, but they lack depth. You can see they're headline readers. Most of them are not book readers.
You're talking about majority of our politicians.
The ones
and
I say
right
this across opposition and government. I say we have a sense of responsibility that if you look at them, you really see that they're not marked by deep political philosophy.
So it's the ethnic coloration.
Exactly. They grab on shortcuts, ethnic colorations, religions, division. You even say young person, and that kills me. A young person talking about zoning. Say, I want to do this because last time it was from in a state, because it was from this zone, now it's from this zone. You can see how pedestrian that is. So
sorry, did they force that thinking on the people, or it's a reflection of actually what is predominantly the thinking of the people?
No, when it comes to social constraint, it's always leadership.
So you think the politicians
forced it on people? Yeah, it's you see, anytime it's not a natural phenomenon like a mountain or a sea, even sea is being diverted now. People should be very careful. Everything is an acquired state, is acquired taste. Anything social is artificial, is man-made. The way we dress, what we like, our idea of what is beautiful and what is just is what we were taught. Nobody naturally wakes up and start liking a particular color.
But if I could puncture your argument,
yes, please do.
If it was ethnic coloration, in your view, that made us miss out on the opportunity of getting a real third and fourth force, some of these parties were embraced in regions of the country that, would have been unlikely if we would have thought about it ahead of the elections. For instance, in states where the LP won, the election, the presidential election. They won in states like Niger, they won in the FCT, and no one would have thought that they could make a good showing in those states.
Well, I think a lot of observers missed the capacity of the LP. We call it LP. They didn't actually vote for LP. They voted to be obedient and obey. We have to be careful about that as well, because there's a personalization. So that when Kwaji says the third first starts and disappeared, what we actually see is not a movement, an ideological movement, but an embracing of a person or a personality. And so a lot of people missed that capacity. They were saying no structure, they didn't have anything. Some of us were silent as they look at this thing. I think
that's not ethnic coloration, that's politicking.
That's politicking. It's a generational swift. The young people were able to identify with that. And I think, so when we're talking about what are the good or bad things in 2023 politics, I think the advancement of the young people is something that we should note. How positive or negative? I think it is positive in the sense that you have a force coming on. But let me say this, against with all sense of responsibility, their language was terrible. Their attitude was stinking. It was really a very, sort of coercive thing. It wasn't a democratic, dialectical, ideological, persuasive stance of politicking. It was passionate, I was going to say violent, but in reality, they were never physically violent. But I think they were violent in terms of language. But as I've written, and I think I had this argument against Professor Wole Soyinka, and I said that, but we need to be indulgent of them, because these are young people who are passionate, who see black and white. So therefore, you cannot tell them to be calm. It is not a time to be moderate. And, and we must say this. If you're moderate as a young person, you're going to have a mediocre life. It is important at one stage in our life, we should be radical. Then as we grow, we understand moderation. If at a young age you're already moderate, that is not a good life.
It's very interesting the way the conversation is, because some other people argue that there was also the ethnic coloration for the third force, the overwhelming vote it got from a bloc, a regional bloc, and the rest. So it looks like there's always a mix here and there.
It's a mix, and we go back to where I'm coming from. Because of the kind of politics we've been taught to play, anything partisan, anything political would have ethnic coloration.
Okay.
Because people are going to look for it, and they will find it.
We have a third and fourth force also on the show, and I'm talking Mokwe and Neota in our British studios. Over to you guys, Mokwe.
Oh, thank you, Kayode. I do know that, when you started the conversation in Lagos, you said that if this year was going to have a name, it would have been the year of elections. But I dare challenge that and say that, perhaps there would have been a tug of war between the year of the economy and the year of the elections, especially with regards to what has happened with subsidy. But before we go there, we have some news coming in that another community of Budil in Tangor district of Bokos local government area was attacked over the night by assailants. A Transition Implementation Committee Chairman of Bokos Local Government Council, Mr. Monday Kasa, confirmed that security agencies responded to the distress call from the community late Thursday night, where houses were burnt, but no death recorded owing to the timely response from security personnel. The local government chairman explained that the number of deaths still remain around the range of 195, with an uncertain number of missing persons as the rescue mission is still ongoing. So just again, another community, this time of Budil in Tangor district of Bokos local government area, attacked overnight by assailants. Thankfully, no deaths recorded as a result of the timely intervention of security personnel. So this is also part of what it is that we're looking at this year. If we can go back to the conversation now, the fact that security continues to remain at the front burner, continues to remain a major concern for many Nigerians, especially in rural areas. Yes, in cities and in also urban areas. There are places where security continues to remain a concern, kidnapping, one chance, etc., daily crimes. But when it comes to killing of this scale, security continues to be on the front burner. So I would like to ask our guest this morning, when you review security, some people will say, oh, well, if we're to compare with, say, 2022, where at the very beginning of the year, big bang, security was right there at the very beginning. Attacks in Niger State, attacks in Kaduna, and all of those places, seeing the deaths of people above this number at the beginning of the year, but later on we saw it taper down somewhat. 2023 has not been that loud on security, perhaps as a result of the elections. But if you were to look at it generally, would you really say that we've made progress on the security front? Let me ask you, Mr. Chris Kwaja, you are right there in Jos, where things are currently a bit somber as a result of these attacks. Would the people of Plateau State, where you currently live, say that they've made progress on the security front?
I will speak from the perspective of what is happening in Plateau, as well as what I see across the country. We've not made the kind of progress that is expected of the Nigerian security. And this lack of progress I'm talking about is hinged on certain foundational challenges that our security forces are confronted with. When we talk of responses, deployment in terms of logistics and capability to effectively address distress calls by citizens, we are talking of a country of 200 million people with about 300,000 military. Take out other parts of the military that are not involved in direct internal security operations. How many of these military personnel are on ground to effectively respond to distress calls across this country? And I give you an example. If you have 50 armed bandits attacking a community, how many security personnel do we have the capacity to send to that particular community to respond with the kind of proactiveness that is required? I'm not sure we will have up to 25 to be sent. Even if they are going on bikes, how will they be able to even access those communities? We are talking of just one community. How many communities do we have in this country right now that are under direct military deployment? We talk of the police. Where you have the military on the ground, the police plays second fiddle in that community. How many of the mobile police personnel do we have? Many of them are on protection of VIPs. They are protecting other public buildings. They are not on ground to do the everyday policing jobs that we expect. It's unfortunate that Plateau today is a state where since 2001 we've had the military on ground under the guise of internal security management or operations. When you have an over-militarized environment like Plateau or the Northeast, it raises a very serious question about state capacity. And what we are witnessing across Nigeria today is that because the state has not been able to effectively confront and deal with this issue, citizens are losing trust in the state as the sole provider and guarantor of security. And they are now resorting to other means outside the state for self-protection and self-defense. And that on its own creates a huge governance and security problematic that we are seeing across the country today, where even respect for the state and its institution is going down. My sense is that there is a need for the Nigerian state to really take a more decisive action by looking at its own capacity to deal with this issue. I've not seen that conversation taking place in a way that brings in all the stakeholders in this country to really help with this design of a new security arrangement that will help in addressing this problem. Because it is not the responsibility of the military. It's a policing issue. Today, many communities do not even have police presence. If you have communities with no police presence, no governance presence, and the only time they are seeing the state is when there is an emergency, as we see, then there's a real problem to deal with. Because we need a state that is able to effectively govern. And governing communities means state presence. And in that context, what we have today as military and security personnel are far from adequate in terms of what is needed. They must be adequate, there must be adequacy, they must be properly kitted. Because when you don't deal with the welfare of this personnel, how many security personnel are willing to present themselves to confront bandits when they know that they have their own personal challenges to deal with within their own families? How many of them are ready to sacrifice for the country? We've had instances where security personnel sacrificed in the past. The Civil War, Maitasine, and during the Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast. But that has gone down. It has gone down because the welfare of the military and other security personnel has gone down drastically. When you engage, and I've done that, engage many of these individuals privately, they give you gory pictures of their own situation. and that you expect me to go and die for a country that does not care for me. Who cares for my family? Our security personnel are aware and are alive to see how their colleagues who retire are suffering when it comes to their pensions and other gratuity. And you are telling him to go and die. If he dies, his family will be subjected to that same trauma. So we've seen that whole question of nationalism and patriotism on the part of our security personnel gone down. And where you have this kind of situation, you are far from addressing this whole issue of banditry. And that's why you find even connivers or armorists of the military sometimes attacked, or even personnel engage in the sale of weapons with criminals. And for me, that's a very unfortunate situation we are confronted with.
Well, indeed, the security situation continues to remain very disturbing from communities, as you've highlighted, who are dealing with no state presence at all. And I think if my colleague were here, Ayo, he will continue to emphasize the total collapse in many instances of the local government structure, because the local government should be the one, giving the people some sense of government presence at that level. But in this case, we talk about no government presence, no security presence in some communities, and in some other instances, a situation whereby states have been militarized. You've given the example of the Northeast and even Plateau State, where you currently reside. But for the places where we've seen militarization, the question is, are we seeing results? Are the results evident? Because Operation Safe Haven has operated in Plateau State for many years. It's been a standing force in place in that state. Our intelligence agencies, big questions are now being asked of them. So even in the last resort that we've had in terms of holding on to the military or even asking them to maintain a standing force in some states, have we seen the sort of results that we ought to see as a result of putting in these ad hoc arrangements, which are becoming semi-permanent somewhat?
Across communities, not just in Plateau, Nigeria, and I've had the opportunity of visiting many of these states, what you find is that militarization in the context of the law or the prolonged stay of the military in a community have created two results. One, gross violation of human rights that have been unchecked. Two, the fear itself that has become the dominant feature of civil-military relations in those communities, and that this fear have also led to the breakdown of policing responsibilities, because I've had and I've seen firsthand instances where the military personnel are involved in conflict management issues. You see people subjected to frog jumps or being flogged by military personnel. When you ask, they say they committed offense A, B, C. That's purely a policing responsibility. But the military, because of its prolonged stay, have weakened policing capacity in those communities and have taken on roles that are not their own. We've not seen the National Human Rights Commission undertake what I call human rights audits across communities where the military have had prolonged stay, with a view to understanding the extent to which the human rights violations have been perpetrated in those communities and the kind of remedies or access to justice that should be put in place in order to strengthen civil-military relations. The military has on its own tried to win the hearts and minds of communities by providing them with either clinics or hosts, but we are talking about the software, not the hardware. On civil-military relations.
Professor Kwaja, let me quickly go to Professor Kila in Lagos, so that we can also get his thoughts on the review of security for the year 2023. This Plateau incident has highlighted it, brought it into relief for us to be able to examine what has happened throughout the year 2023, if we've made progress or if we've not. What are your thoughts, Professor Killer?
Well, I think the short answer is that we've not made progress. And the Plateau attack reiterates the sad tradition of people attacking communities. Well, I say people, terrorists attacking communities at festive period, Christmas and another kind of festivity. This idea of them attacking people on Christmas Day or festivities is something we should take note of seriously, because there's a general consensus that the way to fight terrorism is through socio-economical activities. I agree with that. You know, unemployment, education, that is something we need to do. It is also said that there should be information for people to know what to do and to be able to share intelligence with security forces to avoid terrorist attack. I think that should be done as well. But I also would like to call the attention of everybody to the fact that terrorists are evil people. You know, people who go out there to go and destroy Christmas Day, you know, a day of joy and merriment, whether you believe or not, are very bad people. So whilst we should as a state do our best to deter people from joining them, when we get to arrest some of them, my argument is that we should deal with them in a very ferocious way, so that those who are caught should pay dearly. To do that, of course, the state needs to be able to present itself as a state. And in terms of this kind of battle, the state needs to show legitimate, superior force at all times. And I think therein lies the problem. That is why we're not making progress, because you talk about the operation that has been in Plateau all this while, and we're still having the problem. I think we really need to rethink our security. The state is not showing itself to be superior. The state is not showing itself to have a force that can overwhelm terrorists, and that is what is needed. So one of the consequences of militarization of state is the abuse of civil rights, we're told, of human rights, we're told. And I think that's the true thing. But you see, somebody also needs to say it very clearly to soldiers who abuse rights, that they're simply thugs and bullies. Someone needs to call them out. We need to understand in this country that the military person has no right to tell anybody job wrong. A military person or police or military, they have no right to beat anybody. And when they do that, there should be consequences for that. Let us assume that somebody has violated any rule or law or regulation. The role of the military is to march them to court, is to match them for process immediately. So we need to make that speedy. And until we understand that sense, that the military should deploy their force, their ferocious force, or the police when needed, we're going to be in trouble. Because how can they be so ferocious and with civilians, and yet they're not able to deal with terrorists? You know, just total rubbish, if you allow me to say that. And I think it should be dealt with that way. Sometimes when I drive, even in cities, I look at these policemen with all their guns standing on the road, and my comment inside me is, what are you doing here? Why don't you go to the forest? Why they're terrorists, instead of disturbing me on the road in Lagos or anywhere across the country? I think we need to share that mindset so that we can prioritize the importance of protecting lives and properties. And really, and I want people to think about the meaning of the word terrorism. These are people who want to inflict terrors on us. So there should be no justification, no alignment for them. They should be declared enemies and treated as such.
All right. Professor Killer, let me start with you, and then maybe we'll get Professor Kwada to weigh in as well on this matter. You said earlier, Kari asked a question, and he said we've not made any progress, politically speaking. But if you go by the Constitution, it says the number one priority of the government is to protect the lives, security, and welfare of its citizens. While we're having this conversation about the political space, we do recruitment every 4 years, recruiting personnel that will run the nation or at different levels every 4 years. And you say we've not made any progress in that. I would like you to weigh in on that, but also tying to the fact that we also need to We also need personnel for the security that we were talking about. The last time we had a security consultant, they're talking about the fact that they're not even enough to cover the whole country, and there's so much of work to be done. How do we solve that in terms of creating awareness, educating the people, educating the government, so that political interest can be put aside to focus on the matter of executing that responsibility in the Constitution?
Well, I think we just need a commonsensical approach, and I use common sense here as defined by Vico, which is a combination of our experience, exposure, and education. When we say common sense, it doesn't mean you're born with it. It just means that you grow into it. But I'm very surprised that this president, who's now 6 months old on that position, has not gone for massive recruitment of security forces, because he said it even before he became candidate. Remember the famous Agbado thing. I think that mindset is there, and I'm surprised we're not following that. We definitely need to recruit more people so that we can overwhelm the enemies we have, the terrorists. But I also think that we need to fine-tune our operation. So Nigeria does not make arms. Nigeria does not generally produce rifles and bombs and bullets, generally speaking. And yet, these terrorists have them. So it tells you that we need to work on our borders for them, stop them from getting it in. We also need to work with our finance system to stop them to be able to buy arms. Then we also need to work on our intelligence by deploying not just gathering intelligence, but also technology. So there are ways, and I say these things, it fascinates me because most of our security men, they attend these seminars where these things are discussed. There's nothing very original in how to fight terrorism again. The experiences to look at, from the Black Panther, the Red Brigade in Italy, the group in Spain, the Irish one. There are case studies to study for those who are interested. Of course, you need to adapt it to your system. So in the Nigerian system, there is a general assumption, a consensus that the reason why terrorism thrives is, one, there's a disconnect with the state. Two, a lot of ignorance. Three, poverty. Four, ability for terrorists to group. And five, inability of the state to act. If we look at those factors, we can't deal with it.
As we wind down now, I'd just like to end with this one on a final note, and I'll go to Associate Professor Chris Kwaja. We always want to end the conversations with some sort of life skills, as it were. Since we've reviewed, let's sort of preview the coming year. If there's one thing you'd like to equip Nigerians with, the people, politically speaking now, what you want them to do different in the coming year, such that we can have better politics, better governance, and of course the dividends of the governance, what will that one thing be? Oh dear, I don't know if you heard that. I just wanted you to speak to Nigerians. If you were to give them just one life skill, political life skill, things that you want them to do better in the coming year, what would that one thing be?
Nigerians must improve on their civic consciousness. Civic consciousness in terms of their understanding of the danger that politics can do to them if they are not proactively involved in deciding who governs them.
Right.
Number two.
Well, I asked for one, but I think you're giving us an extra as an end of the year gift. But we have to wind down now. But quickly, you can make that point.
Yeah, our commitment to a Nigeria that works for all should be an abiding one. And that should form, for me, the foundational construct of our pledge as Nigerians.
So be more politically aware, and then commitment to Nigeria that works. I wish we could go on and on with this, but I guess we'll be picking up sometime soon. Professor Anthony Killer, thank you so much. Professor of Strategy and Development, Director, Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. Thank you so much for your time, as well as Associate Professor Chris Kwaja, International Relations and Strategic Studies, Modibo Adama University, Yola, Country Director, USIP. Gentlemen, thank you once again.